Zubaydah's hands trembled as she held Omari's, their fingers intertwined under the pale glow of the full moon. The dense forest around them was silent, as if holding its breath for the secret union that was about to take place. The flickering flame of a single lantern illuminated their faces, casting long shadows on the towering trees. A few trusted friends stood as silent witnesses, their eyes filled with both joy and fear. They knew what this meant. Zubaydah was defying her family, her village, and the strict traditions that had bound her since birth. Her father had already sealed her fate, promising her to Damu, a wealthy merchant nearly twice her age. The thought of marrying him made her stomach turn, but in their village, love was not a choice. It was a transaction. Damu had offered riches, security, and power, and that was all that mattered to her family. But Zubaydah's heart belonged to Omari, the man she had loved since childhood. She would rather risk everything than live a life of emptiness. Omari's voice was steady as he spoke his vows. His dark eyes locked onto hers, filled with devotion. "I will protect you, always," he whispered, "no matter what comes." Zubaydah's heart pounded as she whispered her vows in return, sealing their love in the presence of the night. In that moment, they were free. Nothing else mattered. No arranged marriage, no threats, no consequences. Just the two of them, bound together by love and defiance. But the wind howled through the trees, as if warning them. The shadows seemed to move, creeping closer. And in the distance, hidden behind the thick underbrush, unseen eyes watched their every move. The secret wedding that was meant to mark a new beginning would soon turn into something far more terrifying. The moment Zubaydah whispered her final vow, sealing her love with Omari, a sharp sound cracked through the quiet night. Twigs snapping, footsteps crunching against dry leaves. Then came the glow, flickering torches appearing in the darkness, moving closer like fireflies with deadly intent. The hushed whispers of their trusted friends turned into gasps of fear. The wedding that was meant to be a secret had been discovered. Zubaydah barely had time to turn before she heard the deep, furious voice of her father, Mzi Bakari. His presence alone sent a chill down her spine. His broad shoulders stiffened with rage, and his aged face, usually unreadable, was twisted with disgust. "Ungrateful daughter," he spat, his voice thick with disappointment. "You have brought shame upon this family." Behind him, the villagers gathered, their faces flickering in the firelight, eyes filled with judgment. But the worst of them all was Damu. He stood there in his fine embroidered robe, his posture rigid, his hands clenched into fists. His expression was not one of heartbreak or sadness, but cold, seething anger. He had paid for her. She was his, and she had dared to defy him. Omari stepped forward, instinctively pulling Zubaydah behind him, shielding her from the wrath of the man who thought he owned her. "She is not your property," Omari said, his voice steady, but his fingers tightening around hers. But Damu didn't even look at him. To Damu, Omari was nothing more than an inconvenience, a pest standing between him and what he believed was his rightful possession. Zubaydah could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears, her breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. She had imagined escaping with Omari, starting a life together far away from this village, away from the chains of tradition. But now she was trapped, surrounded, helpless. And then it happened. A sharp pain twisted inside her stomach, like fire spreading through her veins. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers turned ice cold. The world around her began to spin, the angry faces blurring into streaks of light and shadow. She tried to speak, but no words came out, only a strangled gasp. She reached for Omari, her fingers trembling, but her body no longer felt like her own. Her knees buckled, the strength draining from her limbs. The last thing she saw before her vision faded was the flickering torchlight reflecting off Damu's eyes, dark, empty, watching. And then everything went black. She never heard the screams of her friends, never saw Omari fall to his knees beside her, shaking her limp body, his voice breaking as he called her name. She didn't witness the twisted smile that played on Damu's lips as he watched her crumble, and she never saw her father step back, his expression unreadable, as if he had already decided that she was gone. Zubaydah collapsed into the dirt, her wedding dress pooling around her like a wilted flower. The night that was supposed to be the start of her new life had turned into her end, but no one knew, no one suspected that she was still alive, that deep inside her failing body, her heart was still beating, weak, slow, but fighting. Because the poison that had been slipped into her drink wasn't meant to kill her, not yet. The night air was thick with sorrow, but not everyone grieved. Zubayda's lifeless body lay motionless before the village healer, his wrinkled hands hovering over her still chest. He pressed his ear against her, waiting, listening, silence. No breath, no movement. The crowd surrounding them held their breath, waiting for the final word. Then, the old healer slowly straightened, his voice low and firm. "She is gone. It is the will of the ancestors." A murmur rippled through the villagers, some gasping, others shaking their heads, but no one questioned it. No one thought to check again. Death was final, and in their village, the dead had to be buried before sunrise, before restless spirits could take hold. Mzee Bakari stood over his daughter, his face a mask of stone. He did not weep. He did not waver. To him, Zubayda had made her choice, and now the ancestors had made theirs. "Prepare the burial," he ordered. The villagers moved quickly. There was no time for mourning, no time for tears. A shallow grave was dug deep in the forest, away from the main village, away from where the ancestors would be disturbed. Wrapped in a simple white cloth, Zubayda's body was lowered into the ground. The dirt fell in handfuls at first, then in heavy shovelfuls covering her face, her hands, her entire body. The sound of it was deafening, a final goodbye. And then, just like that, she was gone. Omari, bloody and broken, lay half-conscious near the riverbank, his body barely moving. His breath came in ragged gasps, pain stabbing through every inch of him. They had beaten him without mercy, their fists and kicks fueled by anger, by betrayal. He had tried to fight, tried to reach Zubayda as she collapsed, but they tore him away. He had screamed her name, begged them to stop, but they silenced him with fists until darkness swallowed him whole. Now, barely able to lift his head, he could only watch as torches flickered in the distance, as the villagers disappeared into the night, leaving him there to die. He wanted to scream, to crawl, to fight, but his body refused to move. His love, his Zubayda, was gone. But beneath the cold, damp earth, something was stirring, something that no one expected, because Zubayda wasn't truly dead. Her heart was still beating, faint and slow, struggling against the weight of the dirt pressing down on her. The poison in her veins was wearing off, her body fighting its way back from the edge of death. And then, deep inside her grave, her fingers twitched. A crushing weight surrounded Zubayda, suffocating her in complete darkness. At first, her mind refused to accept where she was. Everything felt heavy, her limbs, her chest, even her thoughts. A strange stillness clung to her, as if she had been trapped between life and death. Then, reality struck her like a thunderclap. Her eyes snapped open, but there was nothing but pitch-black emptiness. Her body jerked as she tried to move, but something held her down. Her hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing against rough wood just inches from her face. A chill of terror crawled through her veins. She stretched her hands in every direction, but all she felt was the same wooden surface pressing in on her. Her breath hitched. Number. This couldn't be real. Then she tried to inhale deeply, but the air was thin. Each breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. Her heartbeat pounded like a drum, so loud it echoed inside her head. The pressure in her chest tightened as her body realized what her mind didn't want to believe. She was inside a coffin, underground. A strangled scream tore from her lips, but it went nowhere. The sound bounced back at her, muffled, swallowed by the suffocating earth above. She thrashed, her arms flailing in the tiny space, her nails raking against the wood. Splinters stabbed into her fingertips, but she didn't care. She clawed harder, desperate to break free, desperate to escape the grave that was never meant to hold her. Memories crashed into her like a wave. The secret wedding, the torches, her father's voice dripping with anger, Damu's cold, calculating eyes. And then, the dizziness, the burning in her throat, the weakness that had taken over her body. Poison. Someone had poisoned her, but not enough to kill her, just enough to make her appear dead. and they had buried her alive. Her stomach twisted with panic, bile rising in her throat. She couldn't die here. Not like this. She had to fight. She slammed her fists against the wooden lid with all her strength, pain exploding through her knuckles. Again. She had no idea how deep they had buried her, no idea if anyone could hear her, but she had to try. Her lungs burned as she sucked in what little air remained. The darkness felt heavier, pressing against her skin, wrapping around her like a death grip. She was running out of time. If she didn't break free soon, she wouldn't wake up again. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the dirt and sweat. The silence around her was deafening, except for the frantic pounding of her heart. She had always thought death would be peaceful, a gentle slip into the afterlife. But this was a nightmare, a slow, suffocating horror that no one deserved. Summoning every ounce of strength left in her body, she balled her fists and struck the lid again, her arms shaking with exhaustion. The wood creaked. She froze, hope flaring inside her chest. She hit it again. The wood groaned, shifting slightly. She wasn't buried too deep. The earth was loose. She could get out. With renewed determination, she pressed against the lid, pushing with all her might. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she refused to stop. Inch by inch, the wood began to crack. Her fingers dug into the small gaps, prying it apart, dirt spilling onto her face. She coughed, spitting out soil, her lungs desperate for fresh air. She couldn't stop now. One final push. A sickening snap echoed in the confined space. The lid gave way. Cold, damp earth tumbled in, covering her hands, her arms. She clawed her way up, fingers grasping at roots, pulling herself forward. Every inch felt like a battle, her body screaming in exhaustion, but she refused to give up. And then her hand broke through. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp, filling her burning lungs. She gasped, her fingers stretching toward the sky. She was alive. She had escaped her own grave. But as she lay there, dirt clinging to her skin, heart hammering in her chest, a new terror settled in. Someone had wanted her dead, and they thought they had succeeded. But now they would have to face the truth. Zubaida wasn't just alive, she was coming back. The darkness was suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Zubaida's limbs ached, her lungs screamed for air, and her fingers bled from clawing at the rough wood above her. The weight of the earth threatened to crush her, but she refused to give up. Panic clawed at her throat, but deep inside, something stronger burned. Survival. Then, through the haze of fear, a memory surfaced. She had once overheard elders speaking about the old graves in the forest, how the soil there was loose, shifting easily after the rain. The thought sent a jolt of hope through her trembling body. If she had been buried there, she might have a chance. Gritting her teeth, she forced her shaking hands upward, pressing against the wooden lid with everything she had. Her arms burned, her muscles screamed, but she pushed harder. A creak, then another. The wood groaned under the pressure, but it held firm. She felt the edges, searching for a weakness. A crack, anything. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She was running out of air. Digging her fingers into a weak spot, she pressed again. A splinter snapped. A crack spread through the coffin's surface. Encouraged, she shoved with all her might. Another snap. The wood shifted, bending under the weight of the loose dirt above. She dug her nails into the tiny openings, prying, tearing, forcing it apart. Then, suddenly, the coffin gave way. A rush of cold, damp earth tumbled onto her face, filling her mouth, her nose. She coughed violently, spitting out soil, but she didn't stop. She wriggled her fingers through the dirt, pushing, clawing, kicking. It felt endless, the weight of the world pressing down on her. But inch by inch, she fought her way upward. Her arms felt like lead, her body trembling from exhaustion, but then air. A single gust of wind kissed her fingertips. The cool night breeze curled around her skin, a whisper of hope in the suffocating grave. She reached farther, stretching, clawing. More dirt gave way. Then, with one final desperate push, her hand broke through the surface. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp, filling her lungs. A strangled gasp escaped her lips as she dragged herself upward, her fingers digging into the loose soil, pulling, heaving. Her head broke through next, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. She coughed, her entire body convulsing from the effort, but she didn't stop. With one last agonizing pull, she emerged, collapsing onto the damp earth. The sky stretched above her, vast and endless, the stars twinkling like tiny lanterns in the dark. She lay there, chest rising and falling in ragged breaths, her body shaking from exhaustion. She was alive. She had escaped her own grave. But as she lay there, her fingers curling into the cold dirt, a new fear crept into her mind. Someone had done this to her, and they thought she was dead. But she wasn't. And now she was going to find out why. Zubayda's legs trembled with every step, her body weak from exhaustion, but she kept moving. The forest stretched endlessly around her, its shadows long and shifting under the moonlight. Every breath burned in her lungs. Every movement sent pain shooting through her limbs. But she pushed forward. She had survived something no one was meant to survive. She wasn't going to stop now. The village lights flickered in the distance, calling her home like a ghost returning from the dead. But she couldn't let anyone see her. Not yet. If they knew she was alive, they would try to finish what they started. She had to be careful. She had to know the truth. Staying hidden behind the huts, she crept along the outskirts of the village, her bare feet silent on the dusty ground. The voices of the villagers drifted through the air, hushed whispers, murmurs of sorrow, or perhaps relief at her supposed death. Then, through the chatter, she heard something that made her freeze, her sister's voice. Safina. Zubayda's heart clenched as she pressed herself against the wall of a hut, straining to listen. She was a fool, Safina whispered, her voice sharp. She thought she could love who she wanted and escape our family's duty. She had to pay the price. A man scoffed in response. Damu. His voice was unmistakable, deep, bitter, angry. She was mine. She had no right to defy me. Zubayda's hands curled into fists, rage bubbling beneath her exhaustion. Safina's voice was softer now, almost eager. It was the only way. If she had married you, she would have been miserable. She never loved you, but I do. Zubayda's stomach turned. A cold realization hit her like a blade to the chest. It had been Safina all along. Her own sister had poisoned her. Damu let out a low laugh, but there was no warmth in it. And now I have nothing. That dog Omari ruined everything. I should have killed him when I had the chance. Zubayda's breath caught. Omari. Was he still alive? Safina hesitated before answering. The villagers left him by the river, but he's strong. He might still be breathing. Damu's tone darkened. Then we finish it. He dies by sunrise. Zubayda felt her body tremble, not with fear, but with rage. They had taken everything from her, buried her alive, and now they wanted to take Omari too. But they didn't know one thing. She wasn't dead, and she wasn't going to let them win. The night was eerily silent, the kind of silence that felt unnatural, as if the entire village was holding its breath. A cold breeze slithered through the trees, rustling the dried leaves outside Safina's hut. She lay on her sleeping mat, her body tense, unable to shake the uneasiness creeping through her bones. The air felt heavier, pressing against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. Then, just as she turned onto her side, she heard it, a whisper, software. Distant, but unmistakable. Safina. Her entire body froze. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs, her fingers clutching the thin blanket tightly. The voice was familiar, chillingly familiar. It couldn't be. It had to be a dream, a trick of her mind. But then it came again, closer this time. Safina. Why? Her hands flew to her mouth to stop the scream rising in her throat. It was Zubayda's voice. She had heard it every day of her life. The voice of her own sister. But Zubayda was dead, buried deep beneath the earth. This wasn't possible. Her eyes darted toward the entrance of her hut. Shadows flickered outside, shifting unnaturally. Her body trembled as she slowly backed against the wall. Was someone playing a cruel joke on her? Or was this something far worse? The whispers didn't stop. Across the village, Damu sat inside his hut, his hands wrapped around a clay cup of palm wine. He had spent the entire day ignoring the villagers' foolish whispers. The stories spread fast. superstition feeding their fear. Zubaida's spirit has returned. It was nonsense. The dead did not return. He had made sure of that. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head, and reached for the ceremonial wedding robe he had prepared for the night that never happened. As soon as his fingers touched the fabric, he frowned. The cloth was damp, cold, confused. He lifted it into the dim lantern light. His breath caught in his throat. The white fabric was smeared with mud. Dark, wet earth clung to it, as if someone had dragged it through the graveyard. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His fingers trembled as he dropped the robe, his mind racing. Someone was trying to scare him. It had to be a trick. But deep inside, a whisper of fear curled around his heart, tightening its grip. Then, the wind outside shifted, carrying a voice with it. "Damu, I'm coming." His body stiffened. The voice was low, barely more than a breath, but it was there. His ears rang. His throat went dry. He wanted to convince himself that it was nothing, just the wind, just his imagination. But then the lantern flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted unnaturally against the walls. A chill ran down his spine as the temperature in the hut seemed to drop. He heard footsteps, light, deliberate, as if someone was walking through the dirt just outside his door. His breath hitched. He didn't believe in spirits. He had never feared the dead. But now, sitting in the dim light, with his stained robe at his feet, he felt something he had never felt before. The village square was unnaturally still. A strange hush settled over the people gathered there, their breaths caught in their throats. Every flickering torch cast long, restless shadows, but all eyes were fixed on the figure emerging from the darkness. Zubaida. Her form was ghostly, wrapped in tattered burial cloth, her skin smeared with dirt. Her unblinking eyes reflected the firelight, making her look almost unreal. Each step she took was slow, deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. A murmur rippled through the crowd, then a scream. Panic spread like wildfire. Some villagers stumbled backward, others clung to one another, whispering in horror. Their worst fears had come to life. A woman buried beneath the earth was standing before them, alive, or worse. Something beyond life. Safina's entire body trembled. She had spent the last hours convincing herself it had all been in her head. The whispers, the cold presence outside her hut, the creeping feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. But now, staring at the sister she had betrayed, she could no longer deny the truth. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed into the dirt, breath hitching in her throat. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Zubaida, forgive me." Tears streamed down her face as she raised shaking hands in surrender. Desperation clung to every word. I didn't want this. I was jealous. I was foolish. I didn't know it would end like this." Zubaida didn't move. She didn't blink. The weight of her silence crushed Safina more than any words ever could. Then, from the edge of the square, Damu moved. His face was tight with disbelief, but fear flickered in his eyes. His hands clenched at his sides, muscles tensed, ready to flee. And then, he ran. He shoved past the nearest villagers, feet pounding against the ground, heart racing. If he could make it to the forest, he could disappear. No one would find him. No one would remember. He just had to get away. But the villagers didn't let him. A roar of fury rose from the crowd, and hands grabbed at his arms, his clothing, his shoulders. He fought, twisting and thrashing, but there were too many of them. They dragged him back, forcing him onto his knees before Zubaida. The once powerful merchant now looked small, helpless. His breath came in quick, ragged gasps, his eyes darting wildly. He opened his mouth to protest, to lie, to bargain, but no words came. The people who had once admired him now saw the truth. He was a liar, a murderer, and Zubaida, the woman he had tried to erase, had come back. She didn't have to say a single word. Her presence alone was enough. A heavy silence gripped the village. The people stood frozen, their eyes locked onto the trembling figures before them. Damu and Safina, their faces pale with fear, their bodies rigid with the weight of their crimes. The villagers had heard the whispers, seen the signs, and now, standing in the glow of flickering torches, they knew the truth. The elders, their faces carved with wisdom and age, stepped forward. Their presence alone commanded attention, and when the eldest among them spoke, his voice was like thunder cutting through the tense air. "Betrayal runs deep in this village tonight," he said, his gaze sharp, "and betrayal must be answered." Damu, the once powerful merchant, fell to his knees, his hands shaking. "Please, I only did what I thought was right." His voice cracked as he looked around desperately, searching for even one sympathetic face. But there were none. The people who had once welcomed him, who had once respected him, now looked at him with nothing but contempt. They had trusted him, and he had repaid that trust with greed, with cruelty, with murder. The elder's voice was firm. "For your crimes against Zubaydah, against Omari, against the honor of this village, you are banished." A murmur swept through the crowd, but no one spoke in protest. The sentence was just: banished. It was worse than death. The wilderness beyond the village was unforgiving. No one who was sent away ever returned. There were no friends, no shelter, no safety, only endless days of hunger and the lurking presence of wild beasts. Damu's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His fate was sealed. Then the elder turned to Safina. She was already on the ground, her forehead pressed into the dirt, sobbing. "I was blinded by jealousy," she choked out. "I lost myself in my own hatred. Please have mercy." But mercy was not hers to claim. The elder's expression remained cold. "You will live," he said, "but you will live alone." A gasp rippled through the villagers. The punishment was severe in its own way. She would not be exiled to the wild, but she would be cut off from the people she once knew. No one would speak her name. No one would offer her food, shelter, or kindness. She would become a ghost among the living, an outcast with no place to belong. Her sobs grew louder, but no one moved to comfort her. This was the price of betrayal. Then, through the crowd, a figure stepped forward. Omari, bruised, battered, but alive. A collective gasp spread through the villagers. He had survived. Against all odds, he had endured. His eyes searched for only one person, Zubaydah. She stood tall, strong, the weight of death no longer on her shoulders. Their eyes met, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. They had suffered, they had been torn apart, but now they were free. Without another word, Omari held out his hand. Zubaydah took it. Together, they turned away from the village that had nearly destroyed them. They did not look back. Their past was buried in the earth. Their future lay ahead. The tale of Zubaydah never faded. It became a whisper passed from one generation to the next, told in hushed voices around crackling fires. Children huddled close as elders recounted the night she was betrayed, the night she was buried, and the night she returned. Some swore that if you stood in the village square in absolute silence, you could still hear the rustling of fabric, as if someone unseen was moving just beyond sight. Others claimed that when the wind howled through the trees, it carried a voice, a whisper, a warning. No one spoke Safina's name anymore. She had become a shadow, a forgotten presence. Once part of the village, now she was nothing more than an outcast, cursed to walk alone. Some said she had gone mad, jumping at every sound, fearing the dark, forever haunted by what she had done. Damu was never seen again. The wilderness swallowed him whole, and no one searched for him. Some believed he had been taken by the spirits of the land, punished for his cruelty. Others whispered that his fate had been worse, that he wandered endlessly, his mind unraveling, haunted by the woman he had tried to erase. And Zubaydah. Some say she and Omari left everything behind, starting anew where no one knew their names. Others believed she had become something more than human, a presence that watched over those who had been wronged, ensuring that justice was never forgotten. Even now, when the air is still and the night is heavy, some claim to feel an unseen presence, like distant footsteps, like eyes watching from the darkness, a reminder that no matter how deep you bury the truth, it will always find a way to rise again.